second episode of the two-part series where I interview VR developer Eric Tereshinski on Jet Allen and his previous VR sword fighting game. In this part, we talk about how he added and tested the multiplayer for his game, usability in VR, and some of the approaches he took to marketing the title. I want to talk a little bit about, I guess you got multiplayer in your game as well, which I think that there's no best practice way in Unity to do it right now. I think that they've just announced a new way to do it as well. Like Unity, certain things I feel like Unity just keeps rolling out new versions for, but I guess multiplayer is one of them. How'd you approach it this time? Is it kind of like a hosted server or using kind of a client-to-client connection? Talk us a little bit about that.
I think technically it's a hosted server. I'm using Photon and Photon for the player. And in the first version of the game, I was using Photon Networking and Photon Voice, and those are both Unity plugins. But Photon Voice was making the game lag when you had too many players in the room. So I switched that to another program called Dissonance, which is also a plugin from the Unity asset store. So Photon Networking and Dissonance is what I used to get the multiplayer. So Photon is basically, it has some pretty good tools to make it pretty simple for setting up a server, creating a new room, having another player join the room, and then you have to make the player be a prefab and spawn in the player into the game, and then you have to mark whether that player is the local player on this computer or if it's a remote player from the other person's computer, and then you have to make the local and the remote player match each other in actions. So the first thing, once I was able to just get two people to connect into a room, was I just dragged and dropped a cube onto each controller to make it look like a hand, and a cube on the head so that I could just see where the head is. I just had it just send the position and rotation of those three game objects and lerp, but from point to point to try to smooth it out. But it turns out from there, that was actually pretty easy. And even with just a head and two hands, not even a real head and hands, but cubes with no material or texture on them or anything, you could still see the body language of the other person. So there's this really fun story about when I was developing Jet Island, trying to get the multiplayer to work. There's a couple of really awesome people. In particular, this guy named Zach was following my YouTube channel, and I mentioned that, hey, does anyone want to help me beta test the multiplayer? And he was like, yeah, I'll help. And I ended up exporting and sending over to him on Google Drive or something, 20 versions of the game before finally I got the settings right. And I kept loading up into the game. We had a Skype window open in the other window, and I'd just type hey, do you see my character? And he's like, no, I don't see anything in here. And on the 20th try, I look around and I see just a floating couple of cubes, and I'm like, wait, what the heck is that? Is that actually a person? Is that the cubes for the head and the hands? And I wasn't sure. So I wave at it to see if it was alive. And then the cubes waved back at me.
Oh, that's so awesome. That must have been so awesome.
I just dropped to my knees and raised my fists into the air. And he said that he could tell that that's what I was doing in real life. He could see my character doing that. That was crazy. Even before, just barely able to get the players together into the same room. But that was enough that we could have full-on communication through body language and wave at each other and stuff. So VR is crazy.
Totally, and I think it's so good to know for aspiring kind of, I guess, indie developers with not a big budget, that is actually possible to convey the emotions and sign language and things like that, body language, through just not even having a full character model, but the hands, the face, and that's just such a big time saver, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting.
In terms of modeling, are you the person who modeled all the assets as well? How'd you go about doing that? Are you sort of a art creator as well as a programmer?
I did most of the models. One of my friends online helped me make the player characters and the hoverboards, and I think everything else was me. I got the textures online from some texture packs. But the 3D models, I looked around and I tried working with a few people to get a few models in the world. And the problem I kept running into with different people is the models would look good, but like something about the geometry, I was just so particular about the geometry, because in Jet Island, you physically collide with everything. Like it really is real collisions, and like you can feel every little bump. Like even if there's just a little triangle out of place, like you can feel yourself bump over it. Where like any other video game, it probably wouldn't be a problem because you just see the character interacting with the object, and you don't feel the character touching the world. But in like Jet Island, like you feel every tiny little bump and change in angle, and like if the ground's just barely slanted, you can feel it. And then on top of that, like, I really needed to make sure everything was absolutely as low poly as possible so that I could push the world and make it as big as possible. And yeah, I actually ended up going about it a really weird way to build the world. I 3D modeled everything and made it so that the whole world is always loaded into the game, where like normal, like say like Skyrim or something, it loads the world in chunks as you move through it. But Jet Island, because you fly super high up in the air, and I wanted people to be able to see things super far away and have that be a real thing they can go to, I decided to make everything loaded into the world all at once. So I did a lot of crazy, weird tricks and built the game in a really weird way. I think most game developers would be like, no, you're supposed to do your level design in Unity, not in Blender. Like, these are supposed to be separate game objects. Like, what are you doing? But yeah, somehow it worked. I kind of did it. I had a bunch of tricks that I learned over the years, and I did like a test scene in Unity and was like, could I build a world like this? And I loaded in some models, and I'm like, well, according to this test, it actually runs. And good thing that test worked out, because I ended up using that to expand on the whole world. And yeah, that was kind of a big gamble. I wasn't sure if it was going to actually work or not.
Yeah. Is performance in VR still kind of a concern?
Yeah, it's getting better now, especially because like when VR first came out, it was like people would recommend the like 980 or 980 Ti NVIDIA graphics card. And now anything in the 10 series, I've heard some people play Jet Island with the 1050 Ti, but anything like 1060 or higher is good. And then now we're on the 2000 series, and anything in the 2000 series will definitely be really good for VR. So if you got the newest generation graphics card right now from NVIDIA, and you're building a new PC, it's definitely good enough to play VR. And then now we're starting to get into the realm of, it depends on the headset. It's kind of like the equivalent of buying a 4K monitor. Like, if you buy a 4K monitor, you also have to buy a more expensive graphics card, because the 4K monitor has more pixels and takes a lot more graphics power to run. So it's kind of like that in VR. So it depends a lot on your headset. So the Oculus Rift S and Windows Mixed Reality and the Oculus Quest are all pretty good, like middle of the road. Like, any computer you built new in the past 3 years should like run it like pretty good. Like, you should mostly not have any problems. Depending on the game, you might have to turn the graphics down to like medium or something, but things are definitely getting better as far as VR performance goes.
Is like the actual headset a big bottleneck, or does it still kind of boil down to the computer itself?
It boils down to the computer a lot. Like, they make a big difference in different ways. Like with the headset, there's a lot of things to consider, like the quality of tracking. You probably want to use something with Steam VR Lighthouse tracking, like the Valve Index or the Vive Cosmos Elite or the Vive Pro. They all have Lighthouse tracking, and that's like millimeter, like I think it's like sub-millimeter precision tracking. So if you're like shooting a sniper rifle in a first-person shooter like game like Pavlov or something like that, and you need that accuracy because you're like in a competition, that makes like a big difference. Yeah, and then there's like a lot of other difference, like just comfort. That's like a big one that wouldn't seem like such a big deal, but you wear it on your head for hours at a time. So comfort is a really, really important thing for a VR headset.
I guess comfort is also something you need to consider as a designer as well. Like, what is the player doing, and is it going to be comfortable to do that for a long time? Is it something you considered when you were creating Jet Island?
Yeah, I had to make sure that the game worked both standing up and sitting down. A lot of people prefer to play the game sitting down. The hook shots actually took a lot of changes and iteration before I finally got something I was happy with. Aiming the hook shots was a big challenge in Jet Island. So other video games with hook shots, such as Windlands, you had like a crosshair that you would just aim over things, and it was like a little white circle. And I always felt like that felt kind of like I was holding like a laser pointer mouse or something like that. And it just kind of took me out of the game because pretty much just because it was HUD. That was really the biggest reason. And I didn't feel like I was aiming at these trees that you had to aim at with your hook shots in that game. I felt like more like I was just selecting the tree. So in Jet Island, I really wanted to make sure that you were really aiming it and that your hook shots also inherited your velocity as you're moving through the world. So it really felt like your hook shot had momentum that moved with your body in the direction that you're moving. So at first I made it so there was no aimer. You just kind of had to just like get used to it. And that was bad. You definitely needed an aimer. People hated that. And then I put like crosshairs on your hand, but I lined it up weird where you had to bend your wrist at a weird angle to look down it. And like that hurt people's wrist, and like no one used that, and that was bad. Then eventually like I had it on the top of the hand, like this laser pointer, and that was like pretty good, but people are like, oh, I have to move my arm too far over to be able to look down it. So then I had to like move it, shift it to the other spot on your hand. But then it was a little bit in the way because there was like a speedometer that tells you how fast you're going on the side of your hand. So I had to shift that over a little bit to make sure you could still, you know, see it without twisting your hand in like a weird angle. Like you can just quickly like glance down and see the speedometer, but also it wasn't in the way of the hookshot thing, and made sure the hookshot thing stuck out far enough that you didn't like have to move your arm too far over. And like, yeah, it was like getting the comfort right, and still tweaking it to this day, like where the buttons need to be like on your hands and in the menus and stuff, like just to make it like comfortable. And yeah, so definitely that's a really big concern. A lot of people have told me like pressing this button here this way gets really tiring over time on your hands, and or reaching my arm out this way is really tiring. And yeah, it's crazy. You have to really think about the player in real life and how that it turns into the virtual world. It's a strange. It's so different than regular video games.
It's just crazy how many kind of interesting and unique and new challenges VR sort of poses as a from a usability standpoint. Like you said, there's just so many problems that have not been solved. Where do I put the UI? Where do I get like how does it work for this type of game? How do we get the motions right for these and that types of action?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an exciting time to be a VR developer, I guess, because these things are still new and need to be fixed.
Yeah, that's the most exciting thing, is just how new everything is, and how like together all game developers right now are just trying to figure out like, how do we even play VR? Yeah, it's cool being in the time that we're discovering this stuff now.
I want to just touch on one last thing, I guess, before we do sort of a wrap up. And that is also like kind of how you marketed the game. Because I think that's always something interesting. People are always talking about marketing these days.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, for example, that you have a YouTube channel, right? I remember actually watching some of your tutorials back in the days.
Oh,
so
yeah.
These are like pretty popular videos.
Thanks.
Do you attribute like a lot of your success to the YouTube channel? Like, how did you kind of grow that? And yeah, tell me a little bit about how you think, to what extent, I guess, that impacted, the success of your game.
Yeah, the YouTube channel definitely played a big part. I mean, it wasn't like so direct, like, I have X number of people who watch my videos, and X percentage of those people are going to purchase the game. And, it's not like my sales came all directly from my viewers. And, I don't know how many of them bought the game and then from there discovered that I have a YouTube channel, or do they see my YouTube channel first and then buy the game? Probably just a lot of everything. So it's really hard to track that stuff. But definitely having a YouTube channel really, really helped so much in the design of the game and getting feedback and having the hardcore fans who end up just becoming your friends. Especially once I got the Discord channel set up, it was actually the username Open Milk, one of the moderators on the Jet Island Discord channel, was actually the person who helped me set it up. And I didn't even know what Discord was at the time, but I'm so glad he helped me set it up, because that has now become one of the biggest places that the Jet Island community goes to hang out and talk with each other and stuff. Yeah, I just get so much feedback, really, really valuable feedback of people want the game to be this way, or, this aspect of the game is cool, or color of the textures in this part of the game don't look good. And then having a group of people that can help you test out the game and hang out with you in multiplayer in the game. And that was probably the best way for me to get feedback, was to be in the same virtual world with the players, hanging out with the players. And it almost felt like I wasn't the developer anymore. It was just, we were just hanging out in a video game together. So I really, really got to experience, closely what it was like to be a player and get their feedback. And so, yeah, it helped so much to have a good number of people. Because if you just have one person test out your game, or you post on Reddit or something hey, does anyone want to help me test out my game? Here's some Steam keys. A lot of people will be yeah, I'll help you test it out. And then they'll play it and then, not email you back for a week. And you're oh, I got to make all these changes, but I need to get some feedback on these things.
Oh, yeah.
You finally get some feedback and they're yeah, it was really fun. And you're thanks, but could you elaborate, please? So a lot of times, you just, they don't have time, or, maybe they just, so you need a lot of people in order to get enough feedback. And hanging out with the people in the game, that was probably the best way to get feedback, because when people went and played the game off on their own, I would ask people to record it so that I could watch it. And some people definitely did, but I had to ask a lot of people before, maybe only 10% of people actually had their computer set up to screen record, and sending the file over was also a pain for most people, because you had to send it through Google Drive and stuff. So it was really, really valuable to watch people play the game for an hour or something. But yeah, so having the community definitely really helped. And then launch day was really awesome, because the reviews came in from a lot of beta players who've been playing the game for a long time. So that way, everyone else hearing about the game for the first time on Reddit and stuff like that, or maybe they saw the trailer for it and they're oh, I want to hear from the other players before I spend money on this, if this is actually good or not. And the second the game launched, reviews started coming in from the beta players who've been playing this game for 50 hours or higher even. They're experts on the game, and, had so much to do with the feedback about the game. So they just had so much to say on launch day in the reviews. And that really, really helped out making, other players who haven't played the game before feel safer about giving it a try. And it took a while for it to really catch on. What was interesting is more YouTubers played my game Swordmaster. I think it made for better YouTube, because I set up it as a third person camera, so you can watch their virtual character fight the other characters. And then it's really fun to watch somebody sword fight in their living room or whatever, wearing a VR headset and seeing the two side by side. So it makes for great YouTube. But then Jet Island came.
Oh, that was a feature in the game?
Oh, yeah. With seeing a third-person view of, on the computer monitor, you would see a third-person view, so that when you screen record for YouTube or something.
Oh,
You could see it from their first person's perspective or from a third person perspective. So it's kind of like you're spectating the fight.
man, that's a genius way to make for good YouTube content.
Thanks.
So kudos for that, man.
Oh, no, totally. I guess that does bring up a really good point. That's another really, really big tip about how to market your VR game for free. And maybe this also applies to regular video games as well, but having tools in the game that make it easier and better for the players to be able to screen record a higher quality video that's more entertaining to watch on YouTube. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that in VR by having like a third person view camera or a camera from different angles around the world. Or another thing I add is a camera that is in the same spot as your eyes. So it's like the regular camera, but it's wider. It has a wider field of view. And I used quaternion.lerp inside of Unity to smooth out looking around. Because like when you're looking around in the real world, you turn your head like really, really fast. And like it doesn't that's just like normal from your perspective because you feel your head move. And you do that like all the time in real life. So it just feels natural in virtual reality. But watching a video of that, it's like, stop moving the camera so fast. And it's like, that's not the camera, that's just my eyes. So I added some code to smooth that out. And it makes it a lot more relaxing and enjoyable to watch on YouTube.
Right.
So yeah, adding features in your game like that. Oh, being able to turn off music is another big thing because YouTubers don't like copyrighted music. And also, if music is playing in the game, it makes it harder to edit the video, and they want to put their own music on top of it. So always have an option to turn off music.
Yeah, good to know. Even, often that is like, I guess, a standard setting, but if you're creating a prototype, something you might not think about.
Yeah, I had to have some YouTubers email me back. They're like, oh, it was actually Node, which was so cool because they're so big. I guess they still are big.
Oh, yeah, I saw that video.
Yeah, it was really cool getting an email from them. Like, I think it was D was the one who answered the email. He's like, oh, I saw this on Reddit. I really want to play it. And then he emailed me back like a few hours later. And he's like, hey, is there a way to mute the music? And I was like, oh my God, let me add that real quick. And I uploaded it. I was like, okay, now you can mute the music. And he's like, all right, thanks. That's going to help out a lot with the video editing.
How awesome is that? Like you literally, many people talk about don't quote unquote assume that if you make it, they will come. But in your case, one of the biggest YouTubers actually literally reached out to you instead of vice versa. They get thousands of emails, but your game just kind of marketed itself so well that they actually want to show it off. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was crazy. I was really lucky.
Absolutely, man. But I guess it's also not just luck. It's definitely, you were making the right game at the right time, I would say.
Yeah.
Sword game when it was still kind of in its infancy.
Yeah.
Man, it's been a really, really amazing episode with so much value so far. But I guess just kind of to wrap things up slowly, I want to talk a little bit about kind of maybe you can share with us what you've learned from just developing the VR game so far. What kind of things you wish you would have known before and some of the things that you think went really well.
Yeah, that's a good question. Things that I wish I knew before, what are the biggest things that I've learned? Try not to compare yourself too much against other developers because every game developer is different. There's no one right way to be a game developer. And if you compare yourself to other game developers, you're just going to get mad and just be like, why are these other game developers so much more successful? But you don't know what they've been through. For all you know, that success did not come easy to them and they had to put in a lot more work than it appears that they've put in. And also, sometimes people get lucky. Sometimes people are just crazy talented. Just everything's different. So there's just no point in comparing yourself to other people. Just focus on making the most game-changing game that you are capable of making. If you're just learning, it's totally cool. Just make whatever is fun to make. Just focus on having fun making something and having fun playing it. I think that should be the number one goal when you're just learning and creating learning projects. Once you get to the point where you had so much fun making and playing your own games that other people start having fun playing your games and you're able to get a lot of people to play your game for free, then you're ready to take the next step and start really put in a lot of effort to make a really good game that will be your first paid game. When that comes around, don't make just another game. Don't make, it's like this kind of gameplay mixed with this gameplay, but with this art style. Like sometimes that works if the combination is like really, really clever and you execute it in like a really interesting way. When you're making a game, it feels incredible because you're the one that made it. And like, that's what makes it really unique to you, is because you're the creator of it. But then you really got to like step outside yourself and think what a regular player is going to think of it, because they don't know you. They're not thinking about the person who made the game. They're just thinking about the game itself. And if it's just another game, sometimes you might get a little success because there's a lot of players out there and they play a lot of things, and you might get a little bit of success that way. But I feel like the way to really make your game stand out is to make a game that's bigger than anything else out there. You want to push the envelope in whatever way is unique about you. Like, you got to have some sort of unique skill that's special, that's like your strongest skill, and take that strongest skill of yours and push something out of the envelope. Make sure that your game is the most at something. Like you break like a world record. Like, this is like the first game that has this, like whatever it is. Like, you want to really shoot for the game being something different. And I think that's what gets people talking, is when something that just didn't exist before now exists. I think that might be the key. And if you don't want to do something because it's too hard, remember that if it wasn't hard, everybody would have already done it. So that's how you know it's a good idea.
So true. So true. I mean, I totally agree with you. You always look at like the subreddit of, what are the games that are getting the most attention? Well, they're the games with like crazy water shader where you're like splitting the ocean, or
I saw that.
Something crazy. You look at it and you just think to yourself, wow, that must have been so hard to make. It looks so amazing. It looks so incredible.
Yeah.
And these are the things that really, really get people to say, wow, like, get their wallet out, because it's just something you just don't see every day.
Right.
And I think that's such a good point there. And for everyone, that's going to be something different. That might be something where someone with really high technical expertise in graphics is going to excel, but someone with very amazing art skills get a different approach. They might really focus on making beautiful models and scenes and things like that. But I guess every game developer needs to find out, like you said, their niche where they can really excel, and just put everything else in that kind of niche into the darkness, you know what I mean, when you compare it to their product.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great insight. Eric, thank you so much. It's been a really long episode, much longer than most episodes that I've done, but I think for good reason, because you've really shared so many useful insights.
Oh yeah, thanks. Just got so into it. Just talking about VR was fun.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Good luck with your next project, whatever that's going to be.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This is a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to this show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a review and subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. For more game development content, head down to moonlightgamedevs.com. I hope you have a great week and join me for the next episode.